Who made you?
Victor.
Bravo. It's a wise monster that knows its own father.
So, when we think about Frankenstein, we tend to think about the bigger adaptations, Hammer Horror, Universal, and some others that we'll be looking at later in the month. But we tend to not look at some of the smaller ones, and there are several out there. And it's one of those that we'll be taking a look at today. Originally broadcast over the course of 2 nights in 1973 on NBC, Frankenstein the True Story is odd. It's a wildly unfaithful adaptation that is unquestionably still Frankenstein. That is to say, while it doesn't follow the specific events of the story, it still hinges around many of the same themes. The discovery of how to create life here comes not from Victor, played by Leonard Whiting, but from Henry Clerval, played by David McCallum, who is Victor's friend in the novel, but here is more of a teacher role, and a somewhat antagonistic one at that, and rather than the usual lightning, they're harnessing the power from the sun, in a nice little nod to the modern Prometheus of the book's title. However, before the creature is completed, Clerval dies, and so Victor uses his brain for the process. When the creature, played by Michael Sarrazin, is born, he begins beautiful. For once, Victor actually succeeded in the goal of making the perfect specimen of humanity. In looks at least. In terms of the mind, he runs a little slow. He can learn, but it's not easy. As time goes on, the process begins to reverse, and he drifts into ugliness, until it gets to such a point where Victor abandons him, and the standard relationship between the two comes into play. Having the two actually form a kind of bond before the abandonment helps to make things all the more poignant between the two. Normally, Victor flees from him immediately, so it's kind of refreshing to see him trying to be like a father to his creation, and all the more infuriating when he leaves him over his looks fading, but also leading to a really satisfying conclusion when the two reunite as equals, as the Arctic ice collapses upon them. An interesting addition to the film is the character of Dr. Polidori, played by James Mason. He plays much the same role as Dr. Pretorius in The Bride of Frankenstein, leading Victor to create the bride, played by Jane Seymour, but not the one who married Henry VIII. But you may remember me mentioning in part 1 that Dr. Polidori was a real person. John William Polidori was present at the Villa Diodati with Mary Shelley when she came up with the idea for Frankenstein and wrote his own story, The Vampire. Putting this real-life person who was on the sidelines of the inception of Frankenstein into the story as an antagonist for Victor and the creature is fascinating to me. He's probably the best character in the film. James Mason's performance is really excellent, dripping with menace as he blackmails Victor into making the bride, and then callously trying to dispose of the creature, who only escapes because Victor doesn't have the stomach for it. And this is what turns the creature cruel here. Not just the abandonment, but their actual attempts to kill him, and he goes for it brutally, ripping off the bride's head with his bare hands, hoisting Polidori up into the middle of a storm, and leaving Elizabeth's frozen corpse for Victor to find. Which segues me nicely into my praise of Elizabeth in this film, played by Nicola Paget. She knows about the experiment from before the creature even lives, revealed to her through bringing a butterfly back to life. She then sums up her opinions on this pretty effectively. From there, she does spend a bit of time just being the naysaying wife, but then, once the decapitation happens, she's the one lying to the police. And when Polidori is on the ship, she locks him in his cabin with the creature, and once they're in the Arctic, she confronts the creature, leading to her death. Elizabeth is normally a bit of a nothing character, so it was nice to see her have some actual agency here. But then there's the claim that this is the true story. You'd think with a title like that, it would be more accurate to the book. It's odd to claim yourself as the true version when you take this many liberties with the source material. Also, the couple of true things they do put in aren't really. So, in real life, Dr. Polidori died at the age of 25, but here he's played by 64-year-old James Mason, and at the start of the thing, there's a little prologue where Mason introduces the film, as he shows Mary Shelley's grave at St John's Wood in London. But she's actually buried in Bournemouth? So the true story is a bunch of lies from the start, and I guess that's the way you should go into this thing if you choose to watch it. It isn't faithful right down to easily disprovable details, and it doesn't care. It's out to tell an interesting story, and frankly, it achieves that goal. So overall, I'd say that this is an interesting enough little film. Well, I say little film, it's 3 hours long. So even though it is quite a long time, I'd say that it's time well spent. And in the next episode, we'll be looking at a different medium altogether.
May I ask you your name, sir?
Polidori. Polidori. But not yet. First, I want to show you something.
Thank you so much for watching part 5 of Frankenstein Month. Be sure to let me know what you thought of it in a comment below, and click on one of the things around here. You know what they do by this point, I'm sure. One thing about this movie that I didn't find a way to mention in my script somehow is that it was written by Christopher Isherwood. Yes, this Christopher Isherwood, the guy who wrote the Berlin novels, the guy that Cabaret is based on. What?